What's up, everyone? This is KhUnlimited. Welcome to episode 11 of Spill the Tearal JRPG Podcast, where we go over some JRPG news, releases, mechanics, what I've been playing, want to play, and more. And yeah, this is the 11th episode. We are officially deep into the double digits now. And so yeah, before we get into it, let's just go over the same shit. I usually do the housekeeping, which is stuff you can honestly skip if you don't really care. Has nothing to do with anything really. But finally, a big difference from the previous episodes will be that I finally had time to play a game. I'll go into the what I'm playing section, but I finally had time to play a game since Ramadan's done. I had a bit more time, so finally there will be something in that segment. Unfortunately, one of the segments is still going to be empty. You'll see later, but it is going to be a more fuller episode, and the what I'm playing section personally is probably my favorite segment, so I'm glad to see that there's going to be more to talk about. But yeah, it's going to be nice to have that back again. And one thing I wanted to mention real quick, last episode did pretty good, which was really nice in terms of views. Did like better than like what it was doing, because I think like around, I don't know the exact number, but like maybe around episode 7, 8 or something, it just started like being very low, the views. And the last episode, it's not like what usually happens where like an episode does good at the start and it just like kind of stops and plateaus. That episode 10 did like normal, and it just kept going up slowly, and I think it might still be, so like that's pretty cool. I don't know what's specific about that episode is making it act like that, because I think last episode was one of those episodes where like there wasn't anything big in it, which sucks. I think that hasn't been a thing since the initial episodes of the podcast. There hasn't been like any huge news to talk about. But yeah, last episode was doing pretty good, so I just wanted to bring that up. And this is going to be, I bet you won't be able to tell a difference from like video or audio, but this is going to be the first night recording, so if the energy is different, if my volume is different, that's probably why. Maybe I'm just doing it subconsciously. But yeah, usually at least last few episodes I've been recording them like at 6 a.m, 7 a.m. or something. Usually before the early recordings I would do maybe noon, but right now it is 9 p.m. because I had a lot more work to do earlier in the day, and so usually I'd be sleeping. Right now we're getting ready to sleep, so like energy might be a bit different because of that. And one last thing I want to mention before going to a bit of a fun stuff is I don't know if you can tell this for the video viewers, but I don't know if you can tell, but the camera angle might be slightly different. I don't know why I didn't think of this, but I recently got a sound bar to put in front of my monitor, and usually the way I set up my camera is the tripod is completely pushed up against the monitor, and that's usually how I align the camera. But because there's a sound bar, my camera is like 2 to 3 inches closer. So I don't know how that affects angle. I'll see when I'm editing, of course, but like I might be bigger in the screen, I might be closer, maybe the background is less blurry, which kind of sucks, but it will look different. I'm not sure if it's bad or not, but yeah, that is one thing that is different. And one thing I also want to do, I want to try to do this every week. I don't know if I can, but the last few episodes I've been showing like stuff that I have that I think is cool. Like I've been showing some Blu-rays. I got this recently, which I haven't started reading physically. Let me just take off the auto tracker, which is, and I'll describe for the audio viewers, of course. This is volume 1 of Silver Spoon, the manga. It is one of my favorite manga. I believe I mentioned this in a previous episode, but everything written by Hiromu Arakawa is just like 10 out of 10 for me. If you don't know who that is, she is the mangaka of Fullmetal Alchemist, and I talked about in a previous episode. She's currently doing a series called Demons of the Shadow Realm, which I think is fantastic too. And so Silver Spoon is it used to be one of my favorite anime. I bought the manga digitally like a few years ago before like I was into physical manga. I'm just gonna put the tracker back on my face so it doesn't lose focus. And yeah, so I wanted it physically because like I was kind of hankering to read it again, and so I got it. And one thing that's nice about the physical ones, unlike like the Shonen Jump manga, it is like bigger. Like I don't know if you could tell, but like it is a lot bigger in size, so it's kind of nice. It's still on that kind of like recycled type paper, but it looks really good. I haven't read it yet physically because I don't have all of them yet. I pretty much, the only reason I kind of like impulse bought these is because most of the volumes went on sale. They're usually like in Canada, I think like $19-20, and they were on sale for like 15 or 16ish, and so I think I need a few more volumes left. I'm just gonna order those ones when they're on sale, and then I'm gonna read it at some point. What's annoying is I actually ordered, I believe, volume 15, which I believe is the last one, a few days ago. It went on sale like 30% off, so I got it. Amazon straight up just sent me a random fucking book, like it's some like book about, I don't know, some like history book. Like it looks exactly the same size wise and stuff, but like it's some like book about some guy who lived in Canada, and so I gotta wait for a replacement now, so that sucks. But yeah, Silver Spoon, if you don't know about it, I recommend it. And before we get into the podcast proper, the thing that I've been doing every episode, let's end off the segment with a random Ghibli card. So I got my deck. I will cut it and take off the auto tracker. We got the 3 of Diamonds, which is I don't remember this from the movie, but it's a very creepy old man floating face. I don't know what this is. For audio listeners, I don't even know if I want to describe it. It's like an old man face is floating. Man's got like white eyebrows. He's very wrinkly. Yeah, it's very scary looking. But yeah, we will be starting the episode on that note. So let's go into our first segment, which is what I've been playing. So for this segment, I obviously talk about what I've been playing. And I pretty much just finished Crisis Core, which is finally, I've been wanting to finish it. I believe like most of this podcast has been me talking about Crisis Core and my progress through it. But then I had to stop a few weeks ago. And I've pretty much been before the final boss. I believe I explained this where like there's a door that pretty much says like, you're going to be going through it and you're going to fight the final boss. And I just didn't want to do it because I needed time for it. Finally had time for it and I did it. It wasn't as long as I thought. I pretty much wanted to set aside like 4 or 5 hours to make sure that I got through everything in the cutscenes. I think the boss fight was like 20 minutes, 30 minutes maybe, and then the cutscenes weren't even that long either. It was like another 20, 30 minutes. So like I got through it quick, thankfully. And I know this isn't something that other people like, but I honestly prefer when the final boss isn't like some randomly hard thing, because at that point of the game, I kind of want to get through it. There actually are games that I've gotten to the final part of the game and just stopped playing because like I didn't have time to set aside the time for the final part, and I just stopped playing. And so I just like when a final game's boss isn't too hard. Final Fantasy 16 was like that, where I didn't find it like overly difficult, which I loved. I actually found Crisis Core to be funny. I felt the boss was like easy, like easier than usual, because there was a Sephiroth boss fight during the game that was a lot harder. There were like random enemies throughout the game, like in the dungeon before the boss fight. They were harder, honestly, the final boss fight. So that was funny. But I thought the final boss fight was still epic in terms of what you had to fight. But that was cool. And for the rest of the segment, I probably will be just going into my thoughts on the ending of Crisis Core Reunion and how it connects to Final Fantasy VII Remake. And so starting now, you probably see on the screen a visual indicator of that I'm going to be talking about spoilers. And the audio listeners, you guys probably just hear some music. So if you hear this music, I'm going to be going to Crisis Core spoilers now, and if you don't want it, for video viewers you can probably just go to the next chapter, and for audio listeners just keep skipping forward until you not hear this music. And so pretty much when I ended Crisis Core, I was surprised with how much I liked the game, because funnily enough, I had it on PC for a long time. My brother actually bought it for me because he wanted me to play it. It's one of his favorite games from when he was a kid. And I played it for like 20 minutes and I just stopped playing it because like I don't know. I just didn't feel, I wasn't really feeling it. I played it when I was a kid, but like it wasn't something which I thought was like amazing or anything. And then fast forward to, I guess like a few months ago, I wanted to play it again. And at this point, I love playing on my PlayStation more because I have a Portal. And so I just bought it again on PlayStation, and I was playing it on my Portal. I played it 100% on my Portal. And yeah, I really liked it. And what's funny is I'm not done my Final Fantasy VII Remake Let's Play yet. I'm like near the ending, so I still have some way to go. But these episodes aren't out yet. I haven't edited them. But like a trend you'll notice in my Final Fantasy VII Remake Let's Play is the more I play, I am liking the game less. Like I'm kind of complaining more because when I first played Final Fantasy VII Remake, I knew that there was some padding and there were some parts that you could have taken out, but I thought there was just like 1 or 2 moments. But now that I'm playing it again, like I gotta say, a lot of the game could be cut out. Like I don't know how long the game is. Say like the game is like 25 hours into the story. Like I'm sure you can cut out like at least 50% of it. Like most of the game is you just going through dungeons and doing padded stuff, and like that game does not need to be that long. And because of that, I do have like a much more harsher opinion of Final Fantasy VII Remake, unfortunately. And so I'm very curious to see how Rebirth lands, because if it's like 7 Remake, I'm not sure I'll like it that much gameplay wise. Story wise, 7 Remake is very good. I'm not sure where it stands in comparison to Crisis Core because I'm not done 7 Remake. And I'm not even sure if that's a fair comparison, because 7 Remake isn't really a complete story, because it's just like a third of it or a half of it or whatever it is compared to the original FF7. And so in terms of story, Crisis Core, I loved it. I loved the gameplay. Gameplay was very strong in Crisis Core. Combat was amazing. There was little to no padding. I didn't do like much of the side quests which you can do in Crisis Core, which is like when you go to the save point, you can do missions, because I didn't feel the need. I pretty much did a couple at the start, and then I thought that I would just do them if I ever needed something. So if I ever needed a spell, or if I was doing shit in the game, or if I felt like I needed to grind, I would go back and do those missions. I never really felt like that. There were some parts of the game which I thought were kind of difficult, which I talked about in previous Spill the Tearal episodes, but it didn't really need me to go and do extra missions. It was just like I was fine to continue the game, and I was able to finish it pretty easily. And so yeah, Crisis Core was a really good game. And the ending, I had certain thoughts on it. I pretty much wrote notes as I was watching the ending, and so like I have them here, so I'll just go through it. And one of the main things I'm still wondering, and I can Google this, I'm just not gonna in case there's Rebirth spoilers for some reason, but I'm wondering, is Crisis Core Reunion like in the universe of 7 Remake, or is it the universe of 7? because obviously, if you know, Final Fantasy VII Remake and Final Fantasy VII are different universes. They're like, the timelines are different. I don't know how they're different specifically, but I do know that what happens in 7 Remake is different, and I talk about this in my Let's Play, but there are specific moments that happen in the game where you can tell they're schisming off the main timeline, which is really cool. And so I'm wondering, is Final Fantasy VII Reunion a part of the 7 Remake timeline? Like, are there changes in 7 Remake compared to the... are there changes in Crisis Core Reunion compared to the original Crisis Core that make it a game that's meant to precede Final Fantasy VII Remake instead of the original Final Fantasy VII? I'm very curious about that. Or is it just the exact same as the original Crisis Core and there's no difference? Because I mentioned this somewhere. I think I was on a previous podcast episode where, like, there was a moment where Sephiroth, when he became bad in Crisis Core Reunion, he pretty much burned down, I believe we were in Nibelheim, and he went to the reactor. But then after like a couple of days when we were back in Nibelheim, it was perfectly fine again. And Zack was just like, that's weird, it was burned before. And like, we just never go back to the plot point again. I don't know if that's something that was in the original Crisis Core. I don't know if that's something related to the timeline shenanigans that happened in 7 Remake. So that was very interesting to me. So I wonder if that's a hint of it being a part of the remake timeline. So that's one thing. And there's also a few other things I'll talk about as I go through my thoughts from the Crisis Core Reunion ending, where it might hint to it being part of the 7 Remake universe. But another thing which is really fucking weird is, so you're playing as Zack, you're with Cloud kind of on the run, and the entire finale of the game is kind of you guys on the run. But at the end of the game, Zack gets a letter from Aerith. I forgot exactly how he got the letter, but he's reading it. And Aerith pretty much mentions that Zack has been gone for 4 years. And when I heard that, I was like, damn, Zack's been on the run for 4 fucking years. That's insane. But then what surprised me is Zack was surprised too. So like, it's not like it was like a thing that it just took a long time. Zack was actually surprised, like, what, it's been 4 years? So there's definitely some time stuff happening, clearly. So is this part of the 7 Remake shit? Because if he's surprised that it's been 4 years, then there's something that clearly is going on. And what my kind of guess is, I don't remember it too clearly, but I believe at the end of Final Fantasy VII Remake, Zack shows up to help Cloud. And I specifically remember Zack looking pretty dirty as how he looked at the end of Crisis Core Reunion, where he pretty much gets shot up and dies. So what I'm wondering is, does Zack like time jump at some point at the end of Crisis Core Reunion to the end of 7 Remake, and that's how they meet in 7 Remake? Is that what's going on? Again, like, I really want to Google what the original Crisis Core was, like, what was the ending of that, what happened with Nibelheim in that, but like, I just don't want to from the risk of getting spoiled for Rebirth, because I know some people would be stupid and spoil that stuff, so like, I'm just not even gonna risk it. But like, that's like, I'm very curious, like, why did 4 years pass when clearly Zack didn't know about it? And so yeah, it's just very interesting to me. And another small thing I want to mention, this is just more of a character thing, not really plot specific, but I was very surprised that Song, the Turk, was kind of he cared about Zack's well-being, because in 7 Remake, Song seems kind of like a hard ass. He took Aerith and he wants to take Aerith back to, I believe he wants to create, I'm not done 7 Remake, but he wants Aerith because she's an ancient. And so I'm like, okay, in 7 Remake, clearly he's like fully on the Turk side. He doesn't really give a shit about Aerith or Zack. And so I was just kind of wondering in Crisis Core, when would he make that turn fully? Because in Crisis Core, he's a chill dude. He works with you sometimes. But at the end of Crisis Core, he tells Cissnei to, you know, go help Zack, help him escape, because I have some letters to give him from Aerith. So he clearly seems to be on Zack's side. He wants to help Zack escape from Shinra. He wants to get Aerith's letters to Zack. But in 7 Remake, he seems pretty hardcore. Maybe it's because of Zack's death. Maybe he becomes more jaded because of that. I'm not sure. But like, that was a very cool thing where it completely switched my perspective on Song, because I believed that he would just become a full villain by the end. But nope, he clearly cared about Zack till the end, which I really appreciate. That was pretty cool to me. And let's see, what else do I have here? Yeah, a small thing I want to mention is, so Zack dies at the end of Crisis Core, and like Aerith kind of reacts to it. Like it shows Zack dying, then zooms out of Aerith's eye, and she reacts to Zack dying. I was wondering whether this was related to the thing that I noticed in 7 Remake, where Aerith just happens to know shit, and I talk about this in my Let's Play, and perhaps there's an answer to this that I just don't know of her being an ancient. But there's multiple moments in 7 Remake where she just knows information that she shouldn't. So like, I believe the only one I can remember right now is that she mentions that Cloud is a mercenary, but Cloud hasn't told her that, and he's surprised that she knows, and she's like, oh yeah, forget about it. And there's other parts of the story too where she brings up information that she definitely should not know, and the people are surprised that she knows, but she kind of just waves it away. And so this kind of seemed like kind of similar to that, where like she clearly knows that Zack died, but she shouldn't really know. And so like I was just wondering whether this was just an artistic thing of her reacting to it, because like some games do that, or whether this was like a plot specific thing where she is able to know that Zack died because she's an ancient or for some reason. So that was just something that I noticed. I thought it was cool that Cloud woke up as Zack was dying, because I was wondering how Cloud gets to his normal state in 7. I still don't know, because Cloud was clearly like in comatose the entire time at the end of Crisis Core. He for some reason gets a bit more conscious at the end of Crisis Core when Zack dies, but I still don't know how he fully recovers by the time 7 happens. I also don't know like how like or why Cloud is a soldier at the end of this, because clearly he saw what happened to Zack. Clearly he saw that Shinra is a piece of shit. So why does Cloud become a soldier? It's either because he wants to take it down from the inside, or he just forgets this stuff. I doubt he forgets, because because he got the Buster Sword from Zack. He probably knows what Zack told him, like promises like, yo, carry my ideals and shit like that. So like I'm very confused on why Cloud becomes a soldier, and I'm very confused on Cloud being a soldier overall. Like I don't know what class he is, because at the end of Crisis Core it shows like the scene of Cloud on the train. He says he's soldier first class. In 7 Remake he mentions that he's soldier first class, but a lot of people think that he's lying about it. I can't tell what color uniform he's wearing, because first class people were black. I'm pretty sure he wears purple. In 7 Remake you can't really tell because it's so dark, but in the original 7 I believe he's wearing purple clothes, which I believe it's third class or second class, I can't remember. I believe it's second class. So I'm very confused on how Cloud is an actual soldier, what rank he is, whether he was actually a soldier or not. Like I have no fucking idea, honestly. And again, I'm assuming this is all answered in the original 7 and maybe even in Rebirth, or maybe even at the end of 7 Remake, I'm not sure. But that's something that I've just been confused on, and like it didn't really answer my questions in Crisis Core on why Cloud becomes a soldier, because he really fucking shouldn't, based on what happened with Zack and how he noticed like Shinra actually is. But yeah, it almost feels like he should have immediately gone to like a Shinra type route of trying to take a Shinra down, which he doesn't really do. The only reason he's in Avalanche is because he needs money. But yeah, that's just something I was curious about with Cloud. And yeah, I think that's pretty much all the thoughts I had. I guess one more last cool thing I can like mention is there's a scene at the end where Genesis, which is the final boss, you kind of lay his body down on a chair and you leave, and there's a scene where a couple of soldiers take him away. You don't see their faces, but clearly they have specific designs, because one has like long gray hair that takes him away, and they seem like first class soldiers. And funnily enough, when the credits were rolling, I just noticed a name in the credits. I didn't know it was them, but I just ended up Googling it, and it turns out it was them. It's 2 characters called Nero and Weiss, and apparently they're in 7 Remake, which I didn't know, which is cool. I don't know if they're in the main game, but I believe one is a secret boss, and I believe another is in the DLC, which is cool. That's fucking dope. I had no idea about that, but like at least from the pictures I saw from Google, they look kind of weird and insane, like more monster like than humans, which I guess makes sense, because that was the entire plotline of Crisis Core, of whether first class soldiers are monsters or not, whether they're human, because they're fucking weird with the Mako energy and shit like that. But yeah, I thought that was pretty cool, because I remember even as a kid when that cutscene happened, I'm like, oh, who are these 2 guys? And I never found out. And so when I saw that scene again, I texted my brother. I'm like, do we know who these 2 are? Like, is there still a mystery? Because it's not like there's a Crisis Core 2. And so my brother didn't know, so when I googled it, it was cool to know that like, yeah, they are indeed in 7 Remake, and I assumed they were in the original 7 too, and that's the only reason they would bring it up. I wonder if Genesis ever brought back in some way. Clearly they took Genesis' body for a reason, so I'm wondering if in 7 there is some plot point with Genesis again. I feel like there has to be, or like it'd be weird to make him the villain of like the prequel of this series. But yeah, I just thought like having Nero and Weiss there was pretty cool. And yeah, that's pretty much my thoughts on Crisis Core. I just like had like a bunch of notes that I wrote down. I want to kind of speak about it. I'm sure I'll speak more about this and maybe more in depth in my Let's Play, because I'm going to be constantly comparing it to 7 Remake as I finish that game. But yeah, I just want to give my kind of raw thoughts on Spill the Tearal, just to, you know, have it out there. And yeah, that was quite long, so we will go into our next segment, which is a JRPG I am looking forward to. Now, this is a segment where I talk about a JRPG I'm looking forward to, and this is probably going to be shorter than usual, because I kind of talked about this in a previous episode, and this technically isn't a full JRPG, but I want to talk about Final Fantasy XVI Rising Tide, the DLC that's coming out. And like I mentioned, I believe I talked about this last episode or 2 episodes ago, and I pretty much reacted to the trailer and like looked at it, and it seemed really fucking cool. Pretty much the rough plot of it is that you get a letter, I believe, from a new dominant, which is a dominant for Leviathan, and you pretty much do something with that. I don't know anything more than that. I'm not sure if we do know more than that. So I'm very curious to see how it plays out. I've been waiting for the second DLC to come out so I can play all the DLCs. I like waiting for every single DLC to come out so I can go back into it, because I don't want to hop into the world and hop out again and keep hopping in when every single DLC comes out. I did that with the Spider-Man game, where I think they had 3 DLCs. I waited for every single one to come out, and then I just blitzed through them, and I really loved it like that. And so I haven't played Echoes of the Fallen, which is the first DLC, and so I'm going to be playing that and the Rising Tide. I also don't know what Echoes of the Fallen like really is. I remember I know it's story based. I kind of read the plot earlier today. I already forgot what it was about. I think it was something about like some black market dealings happening related to mother crystals or something like that. So it does seem like there's some plot specific stuff happening. So yeah, I'm just like really looking forward to this DLC. When I reacted to the trailer, if you watched it, like I was very positive on it. I thought there was a bunch of mysteries which were cool. There were characters I didn't see. There was a character which I thought was the kid that was the dominant Leviathan. A commenter told me that was actually a woman, and I kind of got slightly spoiled from Twitter, which I believe she is from the first DLC. I think it was the same woman, so like maybe that's not too much of a mystery. There was like a cool ass boss fight called like the Time Knight or something like that, which I thought was really fucking cool, so I can't wait for that. Then obviously Leviathan as a dominant just look cool. There's a fight where you're as Ifrit fighting Leviathan, and if you guys have played Final Fantasy 16, you know that the boss fights are fucking insane. I think the Ifrit versus Titan fight is probably the best boss fight in gaming, like bar none in my opinion. And so I can't wait to see how this Ifrit versus Leviathan fight is going to be. And yeah, just from like from a plot point of view and a gameplay point of view, I'm just like very excited. Not even to mention you're going to be getting new powers as Clives, because you're going to be getting the Leviathan's powers, the water powers as you play, and I'm kind of curious to see how that is. What's funny is if a game isn't too hard, which I like, I rarely ever like change my playstyle. So in Final Fantasy 16, you obviously start with the fire powers, and I believe the next one you get is the Garuda wind powers. Those two, because you get to use 3 powers in total, those 2 have always been my powers throughout the entire game. The only time I ever switched was the third one, because I'm just so used to the Garuda powers, even though I don't think they're that good. Honestly, I don't think they're that amazing. I just kept it on because I'm just so used to it of using it in my rotation when I'm fighting. So the fire powers and the Garuda wind powers have just always been in my rotation. The third one, I can't even remember what I used to use. I never used Titan. I just didn't like the slow style. I can't remember. I switched it between. It was originally something. Then I switched it to, I believe, Bahamut for a little while. Then I ended up just using it as Odin, because I really love Odin's powers with the I think it's called the Zentutsketin or Zensuska, something like that, where you get to kind of charge up the special sword and like use a slash attack, which is really fucking strong. And so that was kind of like my final one, which was like Phoenix, Garuda, and Odin. I don't know if I'm gonna change it to put Leviathan in. I'm sure I'll try it for like at least 10 seconds, and if I like it, I'll keep it. If not, I'm just gonna keep like what I have, just so like the game is easier for me. But yeah, I'm just so interested to see how the power is, because usually when there's post game content like this, usually it's the stuff that's added is done better or in a more complex way. An example is like Smash Brothers. The characters that were added later as DLC play a lot more complex and cooler than earlier DLC characters or even base game characters in a lot of ways. And so like I wouldn't be surprised if Leviathan's powers for Clives are cooler than like the base ones, but we'll see how that goes when that comes out. And another thing I want to talk about, maybe the last thing, is I'm just very interested about the epilogue aspect. I talked about this in a previous episode, but it was mentioned that if you beat both DLCs, you will unlock an extra epilogue, and the reaction you're supposed to have when you watch it is like, so that's how it went, or oh, that's how it happened. And so I'm very curious about that, because there was an open ending. I don't know if it'll answer the open ending. I don't really expect it to, but I wonder why they expect us to react like, so that's how it happened, if it doesn't answer some of the open-endedness in some way. If they just said there's an epilogue, I would just expect there's some like extra cutscene. But the fact they specifically said that's a reaction, I do think it's going to answer some of the open ending in some way. So I'm very excited about that, because I love the ending. I love the open-endedness. I'm usually fine with open endings, because it just makes me kind of Google immediately and like see what other people's thoughts are. And so yeah, I have a clear theory on what happened. I mentioned this in a previous episode, but I took like the Occam's Razor route, where like there's nothing complex about it. Clive died, Joshua survived because Clive healed Joshua. Joshua went on to write that fairy tale about Final Fantasy, and then that was it. That was the story. And so I know a lot of people think it's like Clive lived and took Joshua's name for some fucking reason, or I believe a commenter of mine said, which I didn't hate, was I believe they said it was Jill's son. I believe they said it was Jill's son, or yeah, I think they said it was Jill's son that wrote the book, which I don't hate, but I think I still prefer it being just Joshua because it's the simplest solution and it makes the most sense, and there's no other reason for Clive to heal pretty much Joshua and for that to lead to nothing. Like, I'm pretty sure Joshua survived, and yeah, he wrote the book. And so yeah, I was really curious to see how the epilogue ends up. I don't know if it's a gameplay epilogue. I mentioned this too, where I don't see how they would have an epilogue that's gameplay based since Clive dies. And if Joshua does survive, I guess they could have some story beat of like you playing as Joshua. I don't know if they would add an entire new character to play as and program that and animate that just for an epilogue, but we'll see. I do expect it just to be like a cutscene, and I'm fine with that. But yeah, we'll see how that epilogue is when it comes out. And yeah, that's pretty much my thoughts on Final Fantasy XVI Rising Tide and why I'm excited for this DLC. It comes out very soon. I don't know if I'll play at launch because I'm still my priority is 7 Remake first, and then the 7 Remake Integrate/Intermission DLC. And I also want to start Rebirth after that, and then maybe during Rebirth I'll try the 16 DLC and see how that goes. But yeah, I do want to try Echoes of the Fallen and Rising Tide when it comes out. And yeah, that'll be the segment of the JRPG I'm looking forward to, and let's move on to the next segment, which is JRPG news that I think is dope. This is a segment where I talk about some JRPG news. I pretty much go over news stories in JRPGs which I think are important that everyone should know, and other than that, just some news stories that I think is cool personally. I don't think there was any big news. I guess one thing I'll mention is the Final Fantasy XIV Producer Live happened, and they talked about a lot of information. One of the things they released was a benchmark trailer. I didn't really know what that was, but apparently they're releasing a piece of software. You pretty much get to create a character, and I'm assuming benchmark the game, see how it runs, and it lets you go into different areas and things like that. So that's a thing. I did not watch the trailer because I don't want to be spoiled for story beats because I'm only in Stormblood, but I saw like bits of it on Twitter and it looks really good. And yeah, so that's the thing that happened. I would say that's like the big news story, but again, I didn't watch the trailer, so I can't really talk about it. But if you're interested in it, go check it out. It is called the Final Fantasy XIV benchmark trailer, and you can find it by Googling. And other than that, it's just smaller news stories that I want to talk about. One of the things is Metaphor Refantasio, which is a JRPG I talked about on a previous episode. They are planning a live stream that's happening on April 22nd, which is 5 days from when I'm recording this. That's a Monday, and it's a broadcast which will run for approximately 30 minutes, which will feature the latest information and never before seen gameplay, which is pretty exciting because I mentioned this where I kind of wanted to know how the battle system worked more, because it showed in the trailer, in the original trailer, that it was kind of partly real-time and partly turn-based, and I kind of wanted more details for that. So it's good to know that there's going to be 30 minutes of gameplay. And I usually don't watch these things because I don't want to like know anything about a game before I go into it, but I probably will like at least skim through the gameplay just so I can talk about it on this podcast. And since I already talked about Metaphor Refantasio in a previous podcast, it'd be nice if I just kept up to date with it, and I can update you guys in this podcast too. So that is happening. It's happening on Monday, so I will have seen it for the next episodes. On episode 12, we'll probably talk about Metaphor Refantasio a bit more. There was also a new trailer for Sandland, and I was going to like maybe react to it because this was also a game that I said I was interested in, but the hook of this trailer is that it's called Sandstorm, and they pretty much used Darude's Sandstorm as the soundtrack for this trailer, and so I'm not going to react to it because I don't want to get copyright stricken, but that is the thing. If you're interested in it, it's a short trailer, like a minute, so if you want to watch that for Sandland, because I believe it's coming out very soon, you can. Another small news story is that One Piece Odyssey Deluxe is coming to Switch on July 26th worldwide. I don't know if I've ever talked about this on this podcast, but that is a game that I was interested in when it was coming out. I played the demo. I thought the battle system was cool. I thought it was kind of confusing because it pretty much places all your players kind of randomly, and then the camera keeps switching over to different bad guys. So I that was kind of weird to me. But I think that's kind of the biggest turnoff for me personally, was that like the gameplay when you weren't in battles is very rough feeling, like you couldn't really jump properly, the platforming was kind of shit and things like that. So like I mentioned this, I don't know where I mentioned this, I remember talking about it in some video, but I said that I would pick up the game, feels very cheap. I'm not sure if it's gone very cheap, but it's the type of game where I'd pick up for like 15-20 bucks probably, and maybe play through it play through some of it and not really finish it. So yeah, that is a game I'm still kind of into because I'm a massive One Piece fan. But yeah, that is coming out on Switch on July 26th worldwide. And the final piece of news that I want to talk about, this wasn't on any news story. I forgot to mention this at the top, but I source my news stories from GameMonsters.com. But I didn't see this on any website, but I saw this trailer in my sub box on YouTube, which there's a game called Yasha, Legends of the Demon Blade. And technically it's not a JRPG, it's Taiwanese, but it looks really cool to me. I'm watching the gameplay right now. I'm assuming this is early footage because the performance is pretty shit, to be honest, at some points of the trailer. Like the frame rate is very low. But it reminds me a lot of like classic Ys. So like Ys 7 and that type of game where like the camera's kind of top view isometric-ish. It's 3D. It's real-time combat like Ys. But the combat looks a lot more vibrant and cool and like maybe more varied. One thing I noticed is the combat is very big. Like you'll see a boss doing an attack and it like their slashes fill half the screen, your character slashes will fill like a quarter of the screen. Like you're doing like very long range attacks even though you're using swords. So that looks cool. The art style is pretty nice too. It reminds me kind of like of, I would say, Boundless Nayata or like Zwei, which I believe is pronounced ZWEI. That's another game. And so that type of style is cool. It gives like very like traditional Japanese vibes with how it looks. Some of the characters are like you play as a human, now you're playing as a tiger, you're fighting this big like octopus looking boss, which looks pretty cool. But yeah, Yasha, Legends of the Demon Blade, it looks pretty cool to me, honestly. And so that's something I'm probably going to keep my eye on because yeah, it just looks pretty interesting. And this is like one of those games, like I mentioned, I'll probably pick it up when it's cheap. It does look kind of like a more low budget game. Like honestly, it looks like a game that might release like at 20 bucks or something. But yeah, that is the last piece of news that I want to talk about before moving on to the next segment, which is JRPGs that are releasing this week. And the JRPG that is releasing this week is none. Yeah, I noticed that April when I first, kind of pulled up the page, I sourced my game releases from icicledisaster.com and rpgsite.net. There are like pretty much no releases for April for JRPGs until like the end of April. So I believe next episode I will be talking about some releases, but there were none on icicledisaster.com. rpgsite.net had some RPGs, but none of them I would consider JRPGs. There were some that were like in the anime style for the art style, but like if you look at the gameplay, like they don't look like JRPGs in any way. So I didn't bring them up because there wasn't even a single JRPG like which I would have maybe mentioned on this slow release week. But yeah, no releases, so we're going to be going straight to our next segment, which is a JRPG mechanic / character theme or whatever that I think is cool. So in this segment I talk about some kind of mechanic or thing of JRPGs that I like, and this week is not really a mechanic, but it's a thing that some JRPGs do. It's done generally in gaming too that I want to talk about, and it's kind of relevant to what I talked about in a previous segment, and that is post-release content. So I talked about Final Fantasy Rising Tide, or I believe it's called The Rising Tide maybe, but that's obviously post-release content DLC for Final Fantasy 16. And I'm actually curious like whether post-release content is seen as good now, because I remember there was like a long time where everyone fucking hated DLC no matter what. I believe it's probably still seen mostly negatively these days, but I don't have too much of a problem with it, especially if it comes like after a while, like with the rise of the Rising Tide DLC and even like Echoes of the Fallen. Like they came like far enough where like yeah, it makes sense that these wouldn't be part of the main game, because usually that's the main argument people would make, where like they would say like, oh, this could have been part of the main game and I would have been able to save money. But like Final Fantasy 16 came out in June of 2023, I want to say. And The Rising Tide is coming out in April 2024, so like there's no way this would have been in the main game in any way. And so like it coming as post-release DLC, which is and it's not even that expensive. I believe like the first DLC, and I believe this would probably be around the same price, was like, or is like 15-20 bucks, and that's Canadian, and in America it's probably a fucking lot cheaper. And so it doesn't cost that much. It'd be one thing if it was like another 40 bucks, and I'd be like, yeah, that sucks. But like, it's not that expensive. It has a lot of cool story stuff. It has cool gameplay stuff. Like, there's no reason for me to hate it. And so like, I think overall in terms of post-release content, I'm okay with it. And I'm only okay with it with stuff like this, which is like, it gives a lot of story and a lot of gameplay. I'm kind of indifferent to the post-release content, which is like adjustments, balances, new difficulty mode, because honestly, when like they add like a photo mode or they add a new difficulty, I don't really care about that, because I don't like playing harder games. I personally I legitimately cannot see the fun in that, so I never partake in that. And in terms of like photo mode and stuff, I personally just don't really use it unless it's already in the game when I play it the first time. I'll never come back to a game for photo mode. And so things like that, I think they're cool, but they're not for me. So whenever a game adds more story and gameplay, that is for me. So the Rising Tide, I think, is a good idea. Another big example, which I loved and I thought added a fuck ton, which was for Kingdom Hearts 3, which was the Remind DLC, which was really cool to see because anyone who plays Kingdom Hearts knows that the final mixed versions of Kingdom Hearts and Kingdom Hearts 2 were like huge add-ons to the game, and they make the game so much better. And so when KH3 came out, everyone was wondering whether they were going to do a final mix, and they kind of did through Remind. I still don't know why they just didn't call it Final Mix. They clearly had the branding, but it was called the Remind DLC, and I have it written here, but the Remind DLC added a Remind story episode, it added a limit cut episode plus 13 bosses, it added a secret episode plus a secret boss battle, which I believe was Izora, and there was other like gameplay slash story unrelated things like I believe photo mode and stuff like that. But like Remind added a lot. It had like 3 episodes, it had 13 bosses plus a secret boss. And I believe like the Remind story episode was like pretty much the ending. They expanded to have a lot more cool fucking shit in it. And so Remind was one of those DLCs, which I believe was more on the expensive side. I believe that was a DLC that was more on the $40 range. But I remember when I played it, I'm like, yeah, this is what I loved, because I still have to replay Kingdom Hearts 3. I straight up haven't played it since launch. So like maybe if I ever do another Let's Play after 7 Remake, Kingdom Hearts 3 might be something that I can do on the channel, because I played it since launch. When I played it, I wasn't the biggest on it. I would like, for Kingdom Hearts 2 for me is like a 10 out of 10 game, like personally for me. And Kingdom Hearts 3 was like a 7 maybe. And my biggest like criticism of it was that like it felt like very back heavy, where like the stuff I care about in Kingdom Hearts is like the Kingdom Hearts plot, not really the Disney plot, and the entire game is pretty much Disney, and in the last like 20% you get Kingdom Hearts stuff, which Remind even added on to. So that was just kind of how I felt. So like, because of my thoughts, it's obvious why I like Remind, because it was like a lot of Kingdom Hearts focused lore, and the whole Yazora stuff was pretty fucking cool. And so yeah, I thought the Remind post content release was really cool. And was that something they could have added to the main game? Possibly, but like in all cases it would just make the game come later, and like I don't know, like that's not really an argument you can use for every game. But yeah, that was just another post release content that I wanted to talk about. And another quick example is Final Fantasy VII Remake has the intermission DLC. I don't know how it is. I believe it's good. From what I've heard, it is the Yuffie DLC where you get to play as her, and so I'm very excited for that, to try that after I'm done the Final Fantasy VII Remake Let's Play. There's something I want to play on my own time and see how it is, and maybe I can talk about that on this podcast as I'm playing that and when I finish it. But yeah, that was another example. And yeah, that's pretty much it. That's what I want to talk about, because yeah, like as long as the post content release is like story and gameplay related, like those are important. There has to be story, as in like it can't, like I don't, like, there are some DLCs for some games where they add like a roguelike mode where you get to like fight infinite waves. I don't like that shit. Like if there's no story, like I'm not gonna play it, because you need some reason to come back to it. And if it's only story, as in it's only a cutscene, I would prefer that over only gameplay. But even then is like, I'm not gonna buy it. I would just like watch it on YouTube or something. I don't know why anyone would buy that. That would probably just be a YouTube video that they would release. But yeah, as long as there's like proper plot and very fun and hopefully new gameplay, I think that's a thumbs up for me, and I kind of like that post-release content. And now for our final segment before we end off the podcast, and this is my JRPG top casual list segment. For the segment that I go through some top list that is JRPG related, and it's very casual. I'm going to give you my top list right away, and then I'll talk about any points that I want to. And if you guys have any thoughts about it, leave it down in the comments below, or just tell me that my list sucks. But this week I'm going to be talking about, and this is, you know, pretty related, which is my top post-release content for JRPGs. And so I pretty much have 3 games that I want to talk about. And yeah, let me just straight up give you my list. At number 3, I have Dragon Ball Kakarot. At number 2, I have Final Fantasy VII Remake Intermission. And number 1, KH3 Remind. And first, let me just start with number 2, actually, because it might sound weird, because I literally just said earlier in the segment that I didn't play it. I am ranking these based off what I've heard and what I've seen and what they do. I think... So I'm starting at number 2, which is weird, but I think Final Fantasy VII Remake Intermission is really cool, because it not only does the things that I like, where it adds more story because you are getting more plot, and it adds gameplay, but not only is that, it's a new gameplay because you're playing as Yuffie, and that's a big aspect of it. It's a new character. If a DLC does that, I think that's pretty cool, because one negative aspect of when you make a DLC that's new plot and new gameplay is that you kind of have this barrier of entry where you have to get back into the universe. So when I get back into Final Fantasy 16, it's going to take me a while to get back into the universe, kind of remember who everyone is, remember how the plot was, remember who Clive is, remember how to play. And that kind of barrier can be enough for you to not play the game. And honestly, if I wasn't doing this podcast or the channel, like I don't know when I would get to the Final Fantasy 16 DLC. Like that could be a thing that I might just like never get to and get to like in years. But because I'm doing this podcast, I kind of wanna play it to talk about it, and so I will. And that's because like there's a barrier of entry. I kind of have to get back into the world and get accustomed to everything. And that's coming from me who finished Final Fantasy 16 not too long ago. I finished it like a few months ago or something. But if someone finished at a release, which is June 2023, and it's now April 2024, it's almost been a year, I can see it being a lot harder to get back into the world and remember everything. So the way Final Fantasy VII Remake handled it, where like technically I'm assuming it's related to the main plot, but it's not so related because you're playing as a new character, and because it's a new character, I'm assuming the gameplay is varied a bit. So it's almost like it feels like a new game, a new mini game. So there's almost no barrier of entry to play it, because even if you don't remember the base game at all, you're coming in as a new character, new plot, new gameplay. Is like it's just very easy to get into. So I'm a real big fan with how they did it. The only reason it's not number one probably is because I didn't play it yet. So we'll see if this changes once I play it. But I thought that it was pretty cool, at least the concept of it. And yeah, that's why it's at number 2. Let me go backwards to number 3 so I can talk about that. I wrote Dragon Ball Kakarot. This is also an example which I didn't technically play. I have it and I know of it. I played Kakarot, the base game, some of it, but this is just another example of where I think they do it right, where they have Dragon Ball Kakarot, which is a game that goes to the story of Dragon Ball Z, and each of their DLCs are pretty much just adding on to the story based on the actual anime / manga or whatever. So I believe I don't remember the exact DLCs, but I believe they have a DLC for like Battle of Gods, for example. They might have a DLC for Resurrection F. Recently they added a DLC for the End of Z. So like that's my favorite way of doing that type of game, because what they could have done and what they would have probably done like in the early days is they would have had Dragon Ball Kakarot, which is the story of Dragon Ball Z. Then they would have had to release a completely new game for maybe Dragon Ball Super Kakarot or something like that, and then keep releasing new games. Whereas this way, it's the same engine and all that, so yeah, you might as well just make a DLC, charge a bit more, not too much, just to get some extra story, extra characters, extra gameplay, extra moves. And yeah, it's pretty much it. Like, it's just a cool way for you to stay in the game, and it's almost like a games as a service, but not really, because it's not like it's online or anything. It's just like bringing you back to the story. I just think it's really well done, and it's something that if I ever get sucked into Kakarot, I would love to, play those DLCs. So that's why it's at number 3. And number 1, I already talked about this in the last segment, but Kingdom Hearts 3 Remind. I think it's fucking fantastic how they did it. I just love the amount of content. It's not like they added one story episode and like a couple of extra bosses. They have 3 separate episodes. They had 13 fucking bosses, and on top of that, they had the secret Yozora boss. I think it was done fantastic. Plot-wise, it was amazing. I love like what they added. Gameplay-wise, obviously they added a ton of bosses. I think I actually beat all the bosses except Yozora. I play on the easiest mode in Kingdom Hearts because I suck at games, and so I'm a filthy casual, some would say. And so I was able to beat the 13 data battles surprisingly. And Yozora, I tried fighting, but he was too much for me, so I tried like 2 times, and I'm like, no, I'm not touching this man. And so yeah, so I just thought the amount of content it was the amount of content they added and the quality of content, and because it was like I'm always like mentioning gameplay, story, I just thought it was done fantastically, and that's why it's at number 1. And that's pretty much it. Yeah, number 3 was Dragon Ball Kakarot, number 2 Final Fantasy VII Remake Intermission, and number 1 Kingdom Hearts 3 Remind. That will end off episode 11 of Spill the Tearal. Hopefully you guys enjoyed me talking about what I've been playing again, because that was something which in my opinion was sorely missing from the podcast. I believe that's the most like personality driven segment. Everything else, like the news and stuff, like it's just kind of like I'm just reading off stuff almost, even though I'm not really reading off anything. I just have like my show notes. But yeah, what I've been playing is definitely my favorite segment, and so I'm glad that I was able to bring it back, and hopefully it stays prosperous for the future episodes. So yeah, hopefully you enjoyed this episode of Spill the Tearal. If you did like the episode, leave a like down below. If you have any thoughts on anything, please leave a comment down below. If you're new, please subscribe. If you don't want to see my face and you want to listen to this podcast instead, I should be on pretty much every major podcast service. Just search Spill the Tearal, or if you want some links, they are all in the YouTube description, so you can check that out. But yeah, hopefully I'll see you guys on episode 12 of Spill the Tearal. Peace.